In this instructional video, we're going to look at Bloom's revised taxonomy. Specifically, we're going to look at the categories of cognitive process dimensions. In Bloom's revised taxonomy, there are 6 process categories: remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and finally create. These processes increase in difficulty as we go up the pyramid. When writing instructional objectives, it's important to use language that is correctly aligned with that cognitive process you're hoping your learners achieve. With that thought in mind, let's examine the taxonomy in further detail. The first category at the bottom of our pyramid is remember. This is where the learner retrieves relevant knowledge from their long-term memory. This is similar to the action of recognizing or recalling. Similar verbs you might see on a learning objective aimed at this cognitive process include labeling, arranging, listing, defining, describing, and matching. The next category in the pyramid is understand. This is where the learner constructs meaning from the instruction. Verbs you might see in a learning objective for this cognitive process include interpreting, exemplifying, classifying, summarizing, inferring, comparing, and explaining. As we move up the pyramid, our next category is apply. This is where the learner begins to carry out or use a procedure. Verbs often used to describe this cognitive process include execute and implement. However, you may also see verbs like computing, employing, or demonstrating. Our next cognitive dimension is analyze. This is where the learner acquires the ability to break material into its constituent parts and determine how those parts relate to one another and to the overall structure or purpose. You'll often see verbs like differentiating, organizing, and attributing in this dimension. However, you could also see verbs like categorizing, separating, and interpreting. Going further up in the pyramid, our next step is evaluate. This is where the learner begins to make judgments based on criteria or standards. In instructional objectives aimed at this cognitive dimension, you'll often see verbs like checking or critiquing. However, you could also see verbs like defending, justifying, assessing, recommending, arguing, and concluding. Our final and highest cognitive dimension is create. This is where learners begin to put elements together to form a coherent or functional whole, or where they reorganize elements into a new pattern or structure. In learning objectives with this goal, you'll see verbs like generating, planning, and producing. You could also see terms like developing, composing, designing, and inventing. And that's Bloom's revised taxonomy in a nutshell. I hope you enjoyed this production. Please see the book A Taxonomy for Learning, Teaching, and Assessing by Anderson and Krathwohl for more details.